Hello, it's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation. So what I'll be speaking of is about the specific application of basic income, namely as a peace-building tool. So I'm Diana, I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Vienna. I'm also secretary of the Basic Income Earth Network, so work closely with Malcolm, Hilde, who you'll meet, Julio, and Sarat. So what I'll speak about today is, firstly, what is it that we're talking about when we're considering countries coming out of conflict? I'll speak about what peace building is and its challenges. Briefly suggest basic income for peace, its advantages and challenges, and then I propose the idea of creating money locally to generate a basic income. So what are the specifics of a country coming out of conflict? What are we looking at? So first off, we have widespread destruction. Both physical infrastructure is destroyed, but also we have human deprivation where people are coming out of trauma, they live through violence, and they have a loss of livelihoods. We also have generally a frozen economy, and this is due to difficulty in accessing natural resources of the country in question, and this to varying extents and for different reasons, depending on how the conflict unfolded. And generally, there's a lack of cash where people actually have their livelihoods weakened. And so what happens in this case is that because people have not enough cash, basically the supply chain, the local supply chains of goods and services are slowed down or disrupted. Sometimes we also have countries suffering from international sanctions. So what this means is that the international community kind of closes off exports in and out of the country, and the aim is for the sanctions to reach the autocratic regimes in questions. But what happens is that authorities always circumvent these sanctions, and it ends up actually impacting the populations most. So the vulnerable people become more vulnerable. So this to say that we have a challenging environment where peace building aims to build both the physical destruction, but also livelihoods and social relations, including trust between people. So what is peace building exactly? So when a country does come out of conflict, when conflict stops, the international community, through the United Nations, starts investing and channeling aid into the country to meet the development needs of the country. And the aim is to decompress tensions to avoid a relapse into violence. And essentially what peace building is in fact policies that are designed by people sitting in capitals of the global north. And they have to be, to some extent, in line with donors' interests and agendas in the countries in question. And both now academics and practitioners agree that peacebuilding has had a mixed track record. At the end of the day, it's a top-down approach that becomes disconnected from the local need because it's designed outside. It fails to achieve lasting positive effect because it has a very short-term nature of meeting donor timelines and having quick impact results. And as a result, the peace-building process can entrench inequalities, deepen social fragmentation, and risk a relapse of the conflict. So in my sense, too much is at stake for continuing peace-building as is. What happens today actually is that about 50% of conflicts relapse within a 10-year period. So this to say that there is a lot of room for improvement. So what is the suggestion here? And the idea is to build a basic income for peace. And here what I'm suggesting is to restructure peace-building efforts to include a basic income. So not to replace all peace-building programs, but structure it to include a basic income as part of the projects. And such a basic income would be along of what Malcolm and Sarat explained before. It would be universal, unconditional, regular, basic, and non-withdrawable. Now we can obviously think of some risks and challenges when we are thinking of distributing a basic income in a country coming out of conflict. So first off are security considerations. There might be diversions of funds, due to local mafias or warlords because of the weak legal system. And here we need to think carefully about a delivery mechanism that reaches the intended recipient. That's the first thing. A second thing are economic considerations. For a country coming out of conflict, we often have a lack of skilled labor force due to the brain drain, due to the death within the population. We also have this international sanctions, which I mentioned before, which prevent the import of high value-added goods that are needed for the relaunch of the economy. Inflation is also a consideration. A careful calculation needs to be done because the basic income needs to be within a capacity of the national production. And so if the supply cannot meet the local demand, then there might be a risk of inflation. Reliability and funding of the funding is quite important. And here we need to think of whether if an abrupt halt of the basic income, if it is implemented, what consequences will that have in a country coming out of conflict? I mean, it might basically lead to unrest. And so this is something, the stakes couldn't be higher, where people depend on this basic income to live, basically. The last point here is that what is the local acceptability of a universality element of the basic income? And so if we're treating everyone equally through a policy of like a basic income, will this be accepted in a country coming out of conflict? And we need to think, for example, depending on how a conflict unfolded, let's say a majority accuses a minority population for some atrocities, will they be willing to accept that this minority would also be eligible for this basic income without creating problems? Now, of course, we have advantages. A basic income can empower the individual. If people spend their basic income based on the priorities they set for themselves, this in itself is liberating, and it is in opposition to traditional peace building, where it's very prescriptive. If people are given cash, they're allowed to only spend it in certain locations, or it's only like the poorest of the poorest who will become eligible for the basic income. And so this can circumvent some of the challenges of peace building, which I mentioned before. A basic income would add fuel to the economy by providing a disposable income to people to meet their basic needs. And here the important element is that it's been found through the evidence that people who don't have their basic needs met will, if they have the opportunity to do so, they spend it locally. So in this sense, this can jumpstart the local supply chain, because usually what is available locally is the cheapest. And so in this way, we have a positive impact on livelihoods, as well as the future outlook of people. We also have an important, a significant potential for improving social cohesion if the basic income is provided universally. And in this sense, in a country coming out of conflict, it can increase the sense of belonging. And so this is the other side of the coin of the universality aspect. So if it is accepted that everyone receives the basic income universally, then we can have a positive perception of the other. And so these three elements here, the three advantages, have been evidenced through pilots, tested in stable but developing countries. It hasn't been tested in a post-conflict country yet. So this would need to be verified. So how can we provide a basic income for peace? How can we think of this to be sort of implemented? First option is to restructure peace building to include a basic income. This would involve collaboration with UN agencies. This is the route I've been working on for the last 4 years. We have some tractions with one UN agency, but so far we've been rejected by 2 donor countries. The other option is circumvent international peace building and create money locally. And this can be done with local government or without it. So let's look at some use cases. First setup, a country is undergoing peace building, so there is international efforts there is international aid coming in. So let's think of one side where you have money for basic income, and this is actually the case of Afghanistan, where the UN country team agreed for a targeted basic income for only women and children. And so they want to channel the international aid directly to the people to avoid having to fund the government. So this program has been agreed to a year ago. It hasn't started yet. So the other case is where there is international aid coming in, but there is no money for a basic income. So basic income is not on the radar of the policy making. So this could be the case of Nepal or Iraq. So these are countries coming out of conflict. And so we can think of these cases where the government is pro-basic income or the government is not really interested or against it. And in either cases, one option would be to basically print money locally. The government can decide to just print more of its local currency, or they can use crypto. In the case of no peace building, so a country the conflict ended, but the international community is not interested in sending money, sending international aid for whatever reasons, be it sanctions, such as the case in Syria or Libya to some extent, or there are no sanctions, but there's not much international aid flowing in. This is the case of Lebanon. And here again, we can end up with the two options of the government printing more money locally, or the government using crypto to do so. And these two options here is what I call a homegrown basic income. And I'll focus on crypto for the rest of the slides. So what could this look like using crypto? And this is really an explorative example with a simple illustration based on the model of circles, which you might be aware of, which Julio would present next. It's basically really just inspired by circles. So we have country X and its citizens. They receive a basic income through a local currency or a cryptocurrency, say 10 cents or 10 circles per month. And they can spend it locally in these shops. Now, what's interesting here is that the system can be funded by the diaspora. So citizens of X or people wanting to help citizens of X, but they're living outside of the country. And they can purchase circles with hard currency outside. They can send these circles to their relatives or friends, or they can spend it when they're visiting X. And the interesting thing is because a country is usually, countries come in conflict, are missing high value added goods such as medical supplies, construction material, or medical technology, what they could do is use these euros who fund the system to pay for imports. And in this sense, you can grow the economy and sort of push the ceiling of growth up. Now, what are the advantages and risks of a homegrown basic income? The advantages, both for printing more money locally or using crypto, is that you can jumpstart the local economy without waiting for international aid. So you can circumvent international sanctions when these are in place. And specifically, the advantages of crypto is that you can start immediately in any locality, and you'd be experimenting with independent governance structures and systems. The risks are inflation if it's not calculated properly. The risk also is that if the government of a country coming out of conflict is involved in building this homegrown basic income, you have an accountability issue. These governments are weak institutionally, usually, at least and at best, or at best and at least, they're autocratic governments. So the accountability issue here is a question. The risk in terms of crypto is that you would risk more international political isolation. You may be creating parallel governance systems, which you need to be carefully aware of in a country coming out of conflict. You may risk reprisals by the government if it's not done in cooperation with the government. And with crypto specifically, we have unknown accountability. And so here, we need to think of what happens when the system goes down. You know, or the value of the currency sort of for some reason that is outside the structure that is built in this country changes. So what I'm proposing is to carefully pilot a basic income in a post-conflict setting. Pilots would help us answering the following questions. We would test different money creation systems and mechanisms. We would look at what are the minimal necessary conditions for the economy, for the market to function properly and reach the potential of a basic income we've seen elsewhere. We would also look at the multiplier effect in the local economy at different structures, so at different levels, be it the village, city, or the country. And we would also look at the social cohesion impact, which I mentioned before, so the universality aspect, how is that accepted? And this is important for us to look into because we are possibly looking at a transformational policy tool. It can empower the individual, it can improve their life prospects, and in this sense, it can strengthen people's resilience to resist not being drawn into more violence and war. So that's about it. Thank you very much. I have a forthcoming paper if anyone's interested.
Thank you so much, Diana. That was illuminating, to say the very least. If there's anybody with any sort of experience or theoretical questions in peace building, now is a great opportunity. Sorry.
Hello. So I'm wondering, in this slide where you explain that this diaspora would help funding this basic income, so I guess that's one of the reasons El Salvador did this experiment with Bitcoin, because well, the price of sending transactions back to their country is very high, so Bitcoin will help with this. But here in this situation, how can the funds then be divided equally between all the people in this country? Because you said that so they will send these funds to their relatives, but that doesn't seem to be very equal, right? Because not all the families have people in diaspora. So I'm wondering how could this be divided then equally between all the citizens?
So the illustration actually, the basic income, what the diaspora sends is not the basic income. What is the basic income is what is created locally by the structure. So every citizen receives a basic income regularly on a monthly basis. So the diaspora is only whatever people want to send, but this is not the basic income itself. Yeah. And this is really sort of, this example is just an illustration, something that I can think of. And to develop it further, I would really need your help, basically. I'm not a crypto person, so I'm not an expert in that.
Yeah, no, I can certainly comment further on that. So yeah, that would absolutely be possible. So kind of in the circle system, there could be, there is this concept of group currencies. So kind of you could have in this conflict area, you could have what we call group currency. And as you said, the diaspora, they would not kind of send money directly to the people, but instead they would kind of give some liquidity or some value to this group currency. So kind of the euros are really kind of in a way backing this group currency. So as long as then money is used locally, it can stay in this kind of locally created money. And if it needs to get the goods that are available only outside, well, it would need to kind of in a way sell the group currency for the hard money, kind of euros, whatever, and with those you would probably get the goods. Yeah.
Thank you. So it makes some sense. Thank you.
Hi. When you talk about delivering the basic income to the people, especially in these countries post-conflict, like if you talk about crypto, you first have to solve, how would you solve that everybody has a device to use it? Because, obviously that would be probably very difficult. Did you think about that?
In fact, most people have, in the different countries that I'm considering, technology is pretty present. Connectivity is very present. And in fact, it kind of like, the cell phones is kind of people's, gateway to the outside world. So it's pretty widespread. Yeah. Smartphones. Now, what's usually now happening, there is actually cash transfers happening in humanitarian settings, so around refugee camps, and not only refugee camps, so in countries where refugees have settled. What is now quite used is the iris scan, basically, of people at cash machines. So they go to a cash machine and there's an iris scan, and people get the cash this way. But it is different, but technology is quite present, in fact.
Sorry again.
No?
So this is a second question about these devices being present, and I guess from the active conflicts that we know, that's actually true. So technology is quite present, but still you can't count the number of people. So you need some kind of proof that someone hasn't two phones or hasn't two wallets, and so there needs to be this accountability between actually existing and being one single person, not being two or three. So it's not possible to get two or three incomes, and it's not possible to have zero. And so, have you thought about how could this be made, or this is still an open question?
It is an open question, but there are different possibilities, if I understand it properly from what I've read into the technology.
Thank you.
But I'm not an expert again. Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions?
There was a question about access to devices, but is there a risk of internet connection in these areas, or like the government removing certain services, or like is there a vulnerability risk there?
Also, internet is pretty reliable, but it is something that could be used as a reprisal form if it's provided, outside the government structures, and if the government is not sort of interested or accepting it, and cutting off electricity is an option. Yeah, it's a possibility. So it's a risk that needs to be considered, and this is also in terms of the mechanism of delivery really needs to be thought through properly. But there are absolutely different kinds of risks.
If I may also take a stab at that. I've been in all three situations from three of your questions. I got evacuated from the Burmese war. It was an internal war because it was a crusade, so the military couped itself. And when you have a coup d'etat, it's like the government against itself. It's very common, a structure of war, but it's not a common structure of hot war. So the government took the systems down. There was no broadband. I had to walk over to a friend's house. 72 hours we got off from the world. Devices saved everybody. They were always functional. They were always charged. People found a way. And even today, like almost a year after that war, USDC has a serious arbitrage there. So the Burmese kyat to the USDC is not a one-for-one. Like $1 vis-a-vis one USDC, there's almost a 1,700 mark difference in the local currency, which literally and practically saves lives. So yes, infrastructure is always going to be a problem, but there's also DY in the industry of decentralized science and decentralized wireless. People are trying to build their own mesh networks from local area networks. You just have to know what you're doing. And the Burmese revolution took a lot of their expertise from the Hong Kong revolution. So they already had a playbook. And so in peacebuilding, I think, for example, my Ukrainian friends who fled the war, they got basic income on their devices to whichever country they ran away to. And that helps because you're not starting from scratch again, because you just ran with the clothes on your back. And technology can really save lives, but the layer of humanity that we add on top of it needs to be practical. It needs to be logical. We can't question everything, and there will always be false positives. Like, so in your case, if one mother gets 3 wallets, what's the harm? It's a very small percentage of false positive, you know what I mean? Like, if that's the worst that can happen, it's really not so bad. And yet, it's a very fair point, because in Africa, we've seen, and I work on a fork that is built on crypto altruism, and we see many people have many phones, and then they get relief funds, not through crypto, through normal means. They've done all the paperwork, and then they use it for purchase of arms and ammunition. It happens, malpractices happen. So the question is, what is the degree of false positives to actual negatives, and how much of an impact can we actually measure? Because if we even measure 60% impact, it's massive. We don't have that today, So thank you. Sorry. Anybody else have comments or personal experiences? I mean, those are always helpful in this industry. Thank you so much for your time,
Thank
Diana.
you.
Thank you.